She did not remember the last time she had been warm. Not truly warm, not the kind that settled into the bones and stayed. The girl stood at the edge of a half-dead frontier town, dust clinging to her skirts, hunger pressing low and steady beneath her ribs. People passed without seeing her. Boots moved, voices laughed, doors closed. She swayed once, caught herself, and lowered her eyes before anyone could decide she was trouble. She had learned that lesson well. If you looked invisible long enough, the world might let you live another day. By then, her name barely mattered. Some places had called her Ellen, others Ruth. She answered to neither. At 15, maybe 16 years old, she had walked too far and buried too much to keep count anymore. By the autumn of 1871, she drifted between mining camps and raw settlements like a scrap of cloth blown loose from its purpose, carried by chance instead of choice. Her dress had once been blue. Now it matched the road. Torn hem. Thin sleeves. The kind of clothing that told a story without mercy. Dogs chased her from yards. Women pulled children closer when they saw her tangled red-brown hair and hollow cheeks. At a town called Dry Hollow, she slept behind a stable until a man threw cold water over her like she was vermin. The shock rattled her teeth for hours. She welcomed it anyway. It had been weeks since she'd been clean. Hunger no longer screamed, it whispered. A constant ache she carried like a stone. She learned to move at dawn and dusk. Learned which back doors sometimes offered scraps. Learned which smiles meant danger. She had buried her parents somewhere east of the plains, lost a baby brother to strangers who promised help, and sold off the last pieces of her past just to keep walking. That evening, as the sun bled down behind the hills, she turned away from another closed town without stepping inside. Tomorrow, she told herself. She always did. She didn't know fate was already riding toward her on silent ponies. She only knew the night was coming fast. The creek she followed promised water and gave her mud. She knelt anyway, fingers digging between stones, searching for anything damp enough to lick from her skin. Her hands were cracked and bleeding, but pain meant she was still alive. The sun burned low and sharp through scattered pines, stretching her shadow thin across the ground. She never heard them arrive. One moment the land was empty but for wind and thirst. The next, horses closed around her like a living wall. 5 riders, faces painted, bodies still as carved wood. The air changed. Her heart understood before her mind did. She ran. It was instinct, not hope. Her legs moved fast, then slower, then failed her entirely. Horses cut off every path. Hooves struck earth without urgency. No shouts, no laughter. Just the sound of breath tearing out of her chest as she stumbled and fell hard onto stone. She pressed her palms into the dirt and lowered her eyes. Looking too long invited harm. She waited for the end she had been expecting for months. Instead, someone dismounted. Moccasined feet stepped into view. Beadwork stitched with care. They stopped in front of her and stayed there, patient as the land itself. When she finally looked up, the man watching her was perhaps 30 winters old. His skin was darkened by sun. A pale scar ran from brow to jaw, clean and old. But it was his eyes that held her. Not cold, not cruel. A steady weight, as if he were measuring something deeper than her torn dress and empty hands. He spoke in a language like wind against stone, then Spanish, then broken English. "You alone?" She nodded. "No family?" Her head shook once. He studied her in silence. The hunger carved into her frame. The burns on her skin. The way she knelt without being told. He turned and spoke sharply to the others. Voices rose. Gestures cut the air toward her. Dismissive. Trouble. Leave her. The scarred man answered calmly, firmly. The argument faded. He faced her again and said one word. "Stand." She tried. Her legs folded beneath her. He did not laugh. He did not move. He waited. When she finally rose, shaking like a sapling, he pointed to his horse. In that moment, she understood. This was not force, it was choice. And she had never had much of that left. She took one step toward the horse, then another. The others watched without sound, their painted faces unreadable. The sky had turned the color of bruised fruit red, sinking into purple. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried, sharp and final. She reached for the horse's mane. Her fingers slipped. She tried again. Failed. On the third attempt, her strength gave out. Hands caught her at the waist. They were firm but careful, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. In one smooth motion, she was settled onto the horse's back, and the scarred man mounted behind her. His chest was solid against her spine. He smelled of leather, sage smoke, and the open land. There was no hunger in his closeness, no threat, only necessity. They rode as the sun disappeared. The others flanked them, alert, reading the ground as if it spoke. They traveled toward darkening hills, away from roads and fences. When night thickened, they stopped in a place that looked like nothing. Then she heard it. Water. A small spring hidden beneath rock and brush. She slid down more than she stood. Her legs trembled. The scarred man pointed. Sit. She obeyed. There was no fire, only dried meat and cold, sweet water. A strip of jerky landed near her knee. She stared at it, then forced herself to eat slowly. Too much, too fast, could kill a starving body. She knew that lesson too. The man watched her without expression. When she finished, he gave her more. Pine nuts, food given without demand. He tapped his chest. Coil. The name carried weight. She hesitated, then said hers. May. It sounded thin in her mouth, borrowed, fragile. May, he repeated, testing the sound, softer this time. The others shared their names in the same plain way. No ceremony, no threat. Names here meant you existed. Later, as they settled, Cale draped a spare blanket over her shoulders. Not his own. An extra. She lay staring at stars that felt too close, her body aching, her future unknowable. She was surrounded by men who might decide by morning that saving her had been a mistake. Yet with food in her belly and warmth against her skin, she felt something unfamiliar stir. Not safety, not peace. Something thinner, more dangerous. Hope. The camp revealed itself only when they were already inside it. One moment there was open land. The next, low shelters rose from the valley floor like part of the earth itself. Smoke drifted thin and blue. Children's voices carried on the air. Dogs barked, then fell silent. Life pressed in around her so suddenly it tightened her chest. Eyes followed her. Women paused in their work. Men stepped forward. Curiosity hardened quickly into judgment. May kept her gaze down. Hands knotted in the horse's mane until her fingers ached. Cale dismounted first, then steadied her when her legs buckled. He spoke to the gathered people in a voice that allowed no argument. An older woman pushed forward, gray hair bound tight, bone ornaments clicking against her chest. She circled May like a trader inspecting damaged goods. Pinched her arm, snorted. Laughter rippled from a few onlookers. The woman turned away, verdict delivered. Cale led May to a small shelter set slightly apart. Inside, the air was smoky but warm. Hides covered the ground. Tools hung from the ribs of the frame. He pointed to a corner stacked with worn blankets. You here? Then he left. The day crawled past. No one entered. No one spoke to her. Hunger returned in waves. Near sunset, a girl no older than 12 appeared, wide-eyed and quick. She set down a bowl of thin stew and a gourd of water, then fled before May could thank her. That night, the camp's sounds wrapped around her. Babies crying, women laughing softly, dogs shifting in sleep. Familiar sounds of people who belonged somewhere. Days blurred together. Food came when the girl appeared. Sometimes little, sometimes enough. When May tried to step outside, sharp looks sent her back. She was to stay where she had been placed, like an animal ordered to hold. On the fourth day, Cale returned. He found her thinner, dirtier, still waiting. His jaw tightened. He spoke sharply outside. Soon the girl returned with a full meal. Kyle watched as May ate, slow and careful. You work, he said. No work, no eat. She nodded quickly. Work she understood. But when she tried, the women waved her away, grinding corn, gathering wood. Every attempt ended in refusal. That evening, Kyle argued with an elder. Voices cut the air. At last he entered and spoke quietly. "Tomorrow you learn." Hope stirred again, fragile, dangerous. Morning brought a girl with a comb carved from bone and a small cake of soap that smelled of crushed roots. She pointed to herself. "Tala." Then she pointed to May and spoke a word slowly, shaping it with care. "Inda." May tried to repeat it. Failed. Tried again. Tala laughed once, not unkindly, and showed her how the sound lived in the mouth. They worked until the sun climbed high, trading words for gestures, gestures for meaning. Water, fire, eat, sleep. Each one felt like a narrow bridge laid over emptiness. May washed at the stream while women watched for mistakes. She changed into a deerskin dress Tala brought, softer and warmer than her rags. It fit strangely, but it fit. When she returned, a few women nodded. Not welcome, not rejection either. Work came in pieces, scraping hides, grinding corn, carrying water. Her hands blistered. Her arms burned. Tongues clicked when she pressed too hard or not enough. Once a younger woman stepped in, her expression gentler, and showed her again. The work began to make sense. Days stacked into weeks. May learned which plants fed and which killed. Learned how to bank a fire so it lasted through night. Learned to move without wasting motion. Hunger eased. Strength crept back into her limbs. Her bleeding returned, quiet but steady, and she took that as a sign she was not broken beyond repair. Kale watched from a distance. He never praised, never corrected. But sometimes, when she finally mastered a task, she felt his gaze settle and then move on. That was enough. The sharp edge of hostility dulled. Tolerance replaced it. She was still an outsider, still white. But she worked. She learned. That mattered. One evening, an elder spoke to her slowly, pointing toward the next day. A gathering. Preparation. May nodded, heart quickening. That night, as women sang while they worked, their voices weaving low and steady, May hummed along, unsure of the words but not the feeling. Lying beneath the stars later, she realized she had stopped counting days. The girl who had walked alone between towns felt far away, not gone, just quieter. And for the first time, as Kale's silhouette cut against the firelight beyond her shelter, May sensed that something was shifting toward her. The full moon rose clean and bright, hanging low over the valley like a watching eye. May sat outside the shelter, restless, turning a smooth stone over in her hands. The camp had gone quiet after the gathering. Fires burned low. Laughter had faded into sleep. She heard footsteps before she saw him. Kyle never hurried. He stopped a short distance away, half in shadow, half in moonlight. "Half in." "Walk," he said. She rose at once. They moved past the last shelters and onto a flat rock overlooking the land. The valley stretched wide and still below them. An owl called somewhere close. Cold air slid beneath her blanket, and she pulled it tighter. "You learn good," Kale said at last. "Apache way hard, you not stop." She nodded. Praise from him was never loud. He was quiet a long time. Then, carefully, "I need woman. For my house, for my children." He paused. "My first woman died. 2 winters passed. Sickness. Took our son." May's breath caught. Loss lived in his voice, steady and deep like a scar beneath skin. "I choose you," he said. The words landed heavy. She understood enough now to know this was not romance, it was duty, future, survival. He turned to face her fully. "You take my name, bear my sons, my daughters, you not be alone." "Why me?" she whispered. He studied the land before answering. "I see you by Dry Creek. You ready die. Still fight. Like wounded wolf. Strong spirit." He met her eyes. Strong children come from that. From his pouch he drew a string of turquoise beads worn smooth by time. "My grandmother's worth many horses." He held them out. "You take. You be Apache. You be mine." "If I say no," she asked. "I ride you back to White Towns," he said simply. "No shame." May stared at the beads. At the life they promised. Belonging. Protection. A place that would demand everything she had. "I'm afraid," she said. Kale nodded. "Good. Fear makes you careful. He left the beads in her hands and walked away. She sat until the cold drove her back inside, the turquoise wrapped around her fingers like a question without an answer, knowing whatever she chose would end one life forever and begin another she could not yet see. Dawn came thin and cold. May did not sleep. She sat with the turquoise in her lap until the sky lightened and the camp stirred. When she finally rose, her legs were steady. Her hands were not. She crossed the camp to where Cale worked a bow, his movements slow and sure. She held out the beads. For a long moment he did not move. Then he stood and took them, fastening the strand around her neck with care. The stones rested cool against her skin, heavier than she expected. "I am your wife," she said, using the words she had practiced in the quiet hours of night. Something changed in his eyes, not softness, certainty. The camp learned quickly. Some women smiled. Others watched with guarded faces. No one spoke against it. The beads said enough. May moved into Cale's shelter and into a life that demanded strength every day. She learned without complaint. She worked until her hands hardened. When horses scattered in a storm, she helped bring them home with calm hands and remembered songs. When enemies tested the camp, she stood and held the line beside the women. Bow shaking but true. Seasons turned. Children came. Sons first, then a daughter, each born into a world that did not promise mercy. May became known by another name, one given by the elders for how she stood between worlds and would not break. She carried that name with the same quiet resolve she carried her children. Years later, when settlers came demanding captives, May walked out alone to meet them. She spoke clearly. She did not beg. She did not return. The men rode away, muttering, and the camp watched her come back home. When the land grew smaller and the choices harder, May helped her people bend instead of shatter. She taught children letters by firelight and stories by starlight. She taught them who they were when the world tried to rename them. On a winter night, Kyle asked if she regretted her choice. She looked at their children sleeping nearby, at the beads worn smooth with years. "No," she said, "I chose to endure." Coyotes sang beyond the camp. Stars turned overhead. The girl who had once faded between towns was gone. In her place stood a woman rooted in people, purpose, and love that had been earned, not given. If this tale stirred your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Tales from the Frontier. Where are true Wild West stories, courage is tested, and love refuses to die. Until the next tale, ride on, partner.